And yeah, I think we can jump right into it. Willem sent the first game. It's a max length defense. It's basically very aggressive opening, but not one that we've gone through here yet on the stream. I just want to change my settings here because I think I wanted to change the piece animation. Uh, but yeah, yeah. Thank you all very much for being here, and it's awesome to have enough material. I guess I would want to just start out by saying if anyone has any games that they'd like to send, we still have some open slots for tonight at 6:05 p.m. And as people send them in, we can definitely I'll just add them to the list, and we'll get to them either tonight or tomorrow. But if anyone wants to do some analysis, feel free to just send the games over, and 100% we'll get to them. Yeah. Let's take a look at Willem's game first. Willem sent this game out of the Max Lang defense, and we can take a look. Max Lang defense is out of the Vienna game. It's basically this complicated structure that happens after the f4 pawn is sacrificed. But in the Vienna game, or unlike in King's Gambit, the sacrificed pawn does not occur, on move two. It occurs on move five. Um, so let's take a look at the analysis board, and we can run it as a with the full opening book. Knight f6, f4, pawn takes, knight f3, and there's about 60 games out of this. Knight e5 is a deviation. Max Lang defense, it can either be knight a5 or I guess bishop to b4. But here, the options are yeah, bishop b4 I guess is the primary option. Here castles, e5, knight g4, and the main characteristic move of the Max Lang defense is this e4. Cool. Yeah, thank you for sending it, Topo. Let me pull that game now, and uh, I will yeah, added for tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Topo player. It's added for tonight. Yeah, we'll look it over. And if anyone else has any games, feel free to share them on the stream or to basically send via either chess.com or really any route of communication. Just to send it over, and we'll get to it. But yeah, cool, awesome, awesome, Ahmet. We can take a look. Yeah, I'll add it for tonight's stream if you send it over. Um, sure. Yeah, you too, El Gecko. Cool. Added for tonight. So far tonight we've got 4 of 6, and the next two for sure. We'll get those last two slots. I'm just gonna fill them up. As people send things in, 100% we'll just add them and go from there. It's awesome to have enough material. I really appreciate everyone participating and sending games over and stuff. It makes okay. Ahmed is slot number 5, and we have one more for tonight, and then yeah, should be good. Um, but yeah, so let's look. So the main ideas here, this e5 pawn is under some stressful, basically stressful defense for white. Both knights can take it, and I think the main move here is d4, d4, d6, h3. But you can't kick it immediately. I think if you kick it immediately, the knight just takes this pawn on e5, and white's basically down a pawn. This f4 pawn will be difficult for black to hold, but overall, I think this is gonna get but I think h3 is the right idea. I think it just comes a move later. Um, this is yeah. So basically, this is the actual game. This gets very aggressive very quickly. Uh, Very dangerous. I haven't seen this full game, so I'm just gonna play through it real quick. Um, Yeah, no, that knight e5 was pretty interesting, Willem. Hey, welcome, Link. Uh, yeah, so e4, e5, knight c3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, and f4 here. Um, he takes f4, and black's showing a little bit of an advantage here. But knight e5 is certainly not the move. I don't think there's almost any. Basically it's out of the. Uh, yeah, no, for sure, guys. Yeah, please keep sending them. We're still good for tonight. We have 5 of 6, so if anyone wants to send one now and get the last slot for tonight. But I look at I think I look at about 12 games a day, so plenty of slots at this point. But thank you guys very much all for participating. Um, so yeah, Max Lang attack. I don't know what to do with knight e5 though, to be completely honest. This is a deviation from the mainline theory. Just so we know the mainline theory for Max Lang, it's bishop c4, knight f6, and then either d3, knight a5, or sorry, knight f6, f4, pawn takes f4, and now knight f3, bishop b4, castles, e5, knight g4, d4. This is what I know to be the Max Lang defense. Um, so yeah, so let's look at the I mean, the knight e5 is wild. I mean, the engine assesses that as not having sufficient compensation. But after knight takes e5, I think white's fighting a double-edged situation, but I think should probably be okay. Queen h4 is obviously like black's big threat here. This is very dangerous. But I'm wondering maybe I guess it looks in retrospect a little bit like white can deal with this threat with like bishop to d3 maybe. Um, uh, bishop. I was thinking bishop to d3, knight takes e4, knight takes, bishop takes. But there may be a more tactically accurate way to look at this. These openings are tough. I mean, taking you out of the opening book and putting you straight into tactical play makes this very complicated. D5, and then the engine is suggesting e takes d5. I guess probably e takes d5 makes the most sense. The one real threat and the one that's gonna kind of dominate this game is queen to h4 with this f4 pawn posting. So here I think the problem with bishop takes d5 is uh, yeah, maybe. I mean, castling I think is probably a good approach. I think one of the things that you can do here is one of the things that makes bishop takes e5 or beat bishop takes d5 kind of a problem is that the knight takes it and then it forces white to take back um, the piece, which means that he can't spend a move defending against queen to h4. Queen to h4 is a pretty potent threat. So like with pawn takes d5, the knight can take on d5, but white doesn't lose a piece or require spending a move recapturing a piece. Here with knight takes d5, the engine is suggesting bishop takes d5, but I think that's pretty advanced. I would just play the knight to f3, very conservative response. And here white's just up a piece, and they're calling it a blunder, but it's still up 4 points. So here I think knight f3, which is very conservative and objectively not the best, solves all of white's problems. So white's just up a piece, and that to me is yeah, no, it's safer. It's actually kind of a funny situation because this knight f3 is getting called a blunder, right? Because the optimal computer line is bishop takes d5 and it leads to a +9. Knight f3 is a less than optimal but very human line, which just leaves white up a piece with a game where he's not getting heavily attacked. So the computer sees the +5 differential and is like, okay, well the +5 differential is a blunder, between choice 1 and choice 2. If there's a 5-point loss, then it must be a blunder, right? But the computer has no fear, exactly. So that's what I would say, about the computer is just that it doesn't, in this particular case, it's a good demonstration of like it's not playing the most rational human move. Knight f3 is a game that I would, with knight f3 having been played, I would take white's side of this position 100% of the time and feel pretty good about it because the main threat for black is gone. So yeah, it's like I would never, I from a instructional perspective, um, uh, yeah, no, exactly, right. So it's actually a really interesting computer situation because the +4 is a much better position to be playing, I think. Bishop takes d5, which is what the computer suggestion is probably fine at the end of the day. And okay, so queen h4, king f1. I mean, white's fine here too, probably. But black has threats that will need to be sidestepped. Um, White will still have to be careful here. But with knight f3, the threat's kind of diminished. Um, but anyways, what makes these two moves different, I think, what makes bishop takes d5 and pawn takes d5 different is with bishop takes d5, knight takes d5, and then if castles, then black has regained his lost piece. So this puts white in a situation where he has to choose between either recapturing the piece, which he needs to maintain his one piece advantage, or dealing with a pretty potent threat of queen h4 on the king side. So like on knight takes, I guess like c6 or maybe, but queen h4 creates some difficulties. Um, Although I guess really at the end of the day, the are we in? So this is in the game line. White's still showing pretty good out of this opening. But this king side does get pretty aggressively attacked by g5. Um, yeah, this is a little bit too bad. Just looking at this, white well into this game is showing a one piece advantage. Um, I think here maybe yeah, I mean I'm looking for the real these are tactics as opposed to strategy, so I don't know if I can basically I can't do much to explain except look at the most efficient tactics as played by the computer. From a strategic perspective, White's basically just trying to not give back his material and come up with a competent defense for the king. As is often the case in these types of situations. So if anyone's new here, the place that I would say is make sure that you're studying your tactics prep. I just it's an opening or a game like this middle game is really about precision as opposed to planning. Everyone knows what black's strategy is, which is to attack the king, and everyone knows what white's strategy is, which is to hold on to the piece or significant material and eliminate the king side. Basically eliminate the king side threat. So strategically, the game is more or less solved. It's really about tactics and precision. So for anyone new, I give the same lesson plan to everyone. Just do a chess.com puzzle battle, chess.com puzzle rush, chess tempo, or whatever tactics trainer of your choice is. Do that an hour a day for a month, and I guarantee your tactics will be in a way better place than you started. And at club level, it's going to be a noticeable improvement if you spend that much time on tactics training. A game like this, it's just tactics. Uh, it's very these positions are very pretty, but the engine solves them better than everyone. And your best route of action is to do tactics training so you play more like the engine. Uh, so here, bishop takes g2 is a pretty solid sacrifice. Here, the suggestion is g3. Also a very uncomfortable move to play. Pawn takes g3 takes g3, and there's just a lot of pressure on this g3 knight. That's not even the correct variation. But this, even though it's evaluated as equality, is still a very uncomfortable position for white to play. I'm thinking of where we could have sidestepped this. The quickest way to sidestep the most aggressive attacks here was what I was looking at, which was pawn takes, um, knight takes, and then knight f3. This sidesteps a lot. Ideally, I'm wondering if white could castle onto the queen side. Hey Tarash, how are you? Yes, we did. I actually we looked at it as the last game last night. If you go to last night's the last half an hour of last night's broadcast, it's on for sure. But we got to it a little early, which I was planning to do it this morning, but it's on last night's. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was really interesting. Another track. It was another. Was it another Traxler game, or was that A takes this game? Um, but it's at the very end of the I mean, it was interesting as all the games you send are. But we looked at it in like the last half an hour of that broadcast. So, yeah, I feel bad that we got to it a bit early. Um, Oh right, yes, that's right. It was similar to that. Yeah, right, right. It was the one with the G3. Basically bishop takes G3, pawn takes G3, and then G4, G5 lever on H6. It was cool. We did it. We did a cool analysis of it. Just in case anyone else here is new, all the recordings are free and watchable for at least 14 days. I would make them longer if I could. I would I would have them saved forever on Twitch. And hopefully at some point I'll be able to figure out how to do that. But today every broadcast is saved for 14 days. Yeah. No, thanks, Tarash. It's been analyzed, and it's on last night's stream in the final half hour for sure. Thank you very much for sending the game. Um, yeah, so knight f3 here, and then I don't think that I don't think there's nearly as many aggressive chances for black to move forward. Uh, so f4, knight f3, knight e5, and just a super aggressive tactical situation. White has to be extremely careful, even with only basically three main pieces, or maybe four main pieces attacking him. But yeah, super interesting. Um, I'm wondering here, what the quickest way for White to deal with all these threats is. Um, this structure is very dangerous for White. And I'm thinking of ways to sidestep it. Um, maybe I'm thinking like maybe Queen F3. Um, Queen F3 might be a move that's worth looking at here. On this G4 push, which I think everyone is sort of expecting, Queen can play take on F4, and that provides better Queen mobility and better use of your Queen as a defensive piece against Black's Queen. The combination of those two, I think puts White into a more solid defensive position. What ends up happening here is White's pieces are not, basically the piece that's used as a defensive piece is the knight, and it doesn't really have the right squares to effectively defend against this pawn storm. If you place the queen on f3, this pawn push will happen. But in order to make it really, but basically there's no situation in which the g4 pawn can be played in which the f4 pawn is lost. Isn't lost. So I think from a tactical perspective, this queen f3 might be a little bit of a better, of a better move. It prevents the g4 push, which is so dangerous. Cool. Yeah, thanks, Ashish. I've got it for if you send the game now, Ashish. It will be the slot 6 game tonight. Then if anyone else wants to send anything. Okay, so Ashish has the sixth slot for tonight, and we can work on basically setting up for tomorrow. But please, everyone, just keep sending your games. It's awesome to have enough material to look at. It's great, and anything you send will just go straight on the calendar. It's awesome. Thank you guys very much for participating. Um, but yeah, cool. So I guess yeah, this game basically becomes about tactics. Yeah, of course, chess fan. Definitely. Yeah, send one over, and we'll look at it tomorrow. During tomorrow's 10 a.m. Eastern stream. Um, but yeah, I can't. At the end of the day, I can't do much better than the computer. At solving this basically, solving this very tactical problem. Computer analysis is probably the best. The one intuitive solution I can offer is probably this early Queen F3. I think Queen F3 kind of dead ends a lot of Black's big attacks on the king side. But overall, uh, yeah, overall, I think basically, you know, White has a piece. The strategies are well established, and it comes down to tactical execution. So it shows the value of having strong tactical training. Um, my other idea here potentially is take with the pawn and then move knight f3 back, but that isn't the most objectively good solution. But it is one that simplifies things and puts White's defensive space in a place where he's more familiar. Uh, anyways, it's an interesting game, Willem. Thank you very much for sending it. Um, it's wild how aggressive that kingside attack got, and since your opponent's taking you out of the book in in basically a highly tactical position, the solution to that kind of problem is just outplay him tactically, and for that, tactical training is the best solution. No, it's not. No, I mean, it's nothing to worry. I've gotten crushed out of these types of, I see him mostly out of King's Gambit, but Max Lang has a lot of similarities. Um, uh, but um, but yeah, it's the same concept, Willem. It's just tactical training, and it's gonna come down to execution. These things happen. It's an extremely sharp position, a hard one for White to hold on to, and yeah. I mean, especially if you're interested in pushing the F pawn, um, uh, those are extremely tactical positions. Tactical play is the place to improve. No, they're tough positions to hold. I've lost many of them in my life. But that's my idea for you. It's a very interesting game. You were objectively way up after the knight e5 move, but Black in this particular case put together a very good attack. So interesting. Yeah, please keep sending them, Will. But I think I'm just gonna. Um, there were more conservative plays that White could have made, but at the end of the day, that game was determined by tactics. Let's take a look at the next game. Thank you very much for sending that in, Willem, and thank you very much for participating. It's really your games are always super interesting. A lot of them lean on kind of cool theory, so please keep sending them in. Really happy to look at them. The next game is from Feudaport. Uh, I will load that now. Um, yeah, no, of course, no. Thank you very much for sending these games. It's awesome. Just it's awesome that people are interested in sending material, and it's great to see the calendar filling up with games. It's so much better than a few weeks ago when we were really just trying to get it all together. Um, yeah, so here, awesome. Yeah, thanks, Chess Fan. Chess Fan's game added for tomorrow during the 10 a.m. Eastern stream. Done. Cool. So yeah, so let's look at a Feudaport's game. Um, uh, this is the French. I'm just gonna play through it really quickly because I haven't seen it before. Um, Interesting. Cool. Interesting. Another rook and pawn end game. I think maybe I don't want to commit to anything too for sure, but I'm considering getting a rook and pawn end game. Hopefully this weekend, but at some point in the near future. I think there's a lot of technical things in rook and pawn end games that that are important and come up a lot in and basically come up a lot in many games. I mean, it's probably the most common end game when I think about it. Um, so I'd like to do those on the stream at some point in the near future. Bishop d3, bishop b4, bishop d2, knight takes, and basically this is a well-established French theory. Let's just play through this again. Knight c6 is not the most common move, but white responds with knight f3, knight f6, e5, and basically this is a relatively normal French position. Bishop d3, bishop b4, bishop d2, and white has two knights. And black doesn't have the ability to play the c5 break. One of the reasons why knight c6 here is one of the less common moves is because cool, yeah, thanks Tarash. Yeah, no, always feel free if this is totally one of those things where I'm not uh you know if you ever can't make a stream but your game is coming up, definitely just be prepared to watch it on the video on demand. I'm gonna go over it regardless. So just watch the video on demand. I try to leave those videos up there forever. If I can figure out a way to leave them up there forever, I will. For now, that's 14 days. But please, yeah, just watch it on the video on demand. All the lessons are there. And don't worry if you can't make the stream live. It's sometimes it's better to have the stream live because you can share your ideas as we're going over the game. Don't worry about the being here for the live stream because it is all on video on demand. And yeah, I mean, really, my goal here is just to make lessons free and available to everyone, and as much material as I can contribute. That's the goal. Um, yeah, no, I think that's right, Topo. I'm like many other things on my list of things to improve. I'm looking at maybe there's a way to move them to YouTube after 14 days. But I'm really thinking of how to streamline it. Um, yeah, sure. No. Take yeah. I'll look at that as soon as the stream is over, Tarash. Just since it's I want to give it my full attention. But thank you very much for yeah, no. I will take a look at that for sure. That those pawn lever games are super interesting with G4, G5. Yeah, no, thank you, Jack, and thank you very much for being here. Big picture goal here, really. I think we now have technology in the world to make chess lessons completely free. I there's no reason why a grandmaster, besides the fact that that would probably be better analysis than mine. There's no reason why a grandmaster can't just give lessons for hours a day, and 100% of people would do that. So I think making chess lessons completely free is a completely it's a completely achievable goal. Uh, it opens some interesting questions like, could you do that for every subject? But chess lessons, I know we can do. So that's really the goal of the stream. I want everyone to have access to competent teaching, and hopefully I'm capable of providing that. Um, that's the logic. Uh, anyways, knight c6 here is the issue with knight c6, and the reason why it's a less common move is because it blocks the very common break of c5. C5 basically is one of the more challenging moves for black in the French, or for white in the French. The point of the French, I've spoken about it a few times, is basically whether or not white can maintain this pawn structure. I'm taking this basic concept from the ideas behind the chess openings by Fine, which I think is a classic, super good, easy read. It goes into the concepts of the openings as opposed to the actual specific transpositions and lines. But the point of the French is basically if White can maintain this d4 e5 pawn structure, that tends to be a game that White wins. If Black can undermine or remove one of those two pawns, it tends to be equal. Basically the point of that is that basically the point of it is if one of those two pawns is removed, it tends to be equal or slightly better for Black. But if both of them can be maintained, then White is likely to have the advantage. And the value of a move like c5, is basically, the value of a move like c5 is that it challenges this d4 e5 pawn structure. It provides one route for Black to do that. The other common one is f6, and and basically, with those two undermining moves, the with those two undermining moves, Black aims towards this fundamental goal of the opening, um, which is just basically undermining the center. So with knight c6, that one particular route is taken off of the is taken off of the list as a potential way to do that. Knight e4, bishop d3, bishop b4, bishop d2. And here, yeah, we've sidestepped some of the lines. Bishop d2 is the main line. Knight takes d2, queen takes, and an f6 here. And here, basically, this is the undermining move that I was talking about. This is Black's attempt to remove, this d4 e5 pawn structure using his pawns. But yeah, castles, f takes e5, and basically now, White's pawn center is largely, somewhat neutralized. This is much better for Black than if White was able to maintain both pawns. Let's look at the eval, but my intuition suggests that Black will be better here, and he is. He's slightly better. Bishop to d7 is the suggested move. Castles, I'm sure, is also reasonably fine. And a3, bishop a5, b4, and I guess this wasn't the best continuation for Black. But at the moment, exactly where White's pawn center gets compromised, the engine supports Fine's old idea, which is basically that that Black is better having neutralized the center. Bishop d7 is the move over castles. Let's think about why. I guess probably the engine is considering threats along this h7 diagonal. But yeah, I think the next move here, bishop d7. It provides a straightforward way of developing, and it doesn't compromise the king's safety. I think this way is pretty I think this is pretty much this is a straightforward developing move without any attached compromising defensive things. I think basically the engine would advocate castling queenside here. But let's look at castles. Okay. The game continues. A3, bishop a5, b4, bishop b6. This is a fine diagonal for the black bishop. I don't think White gains too much from that a3 b4 move. Bishop d7, knight takes, a takes, c4, and after c5, this is basically a very big turning point in this game. So I think it's a good move for White. Or sorry. Black. I think White may have been able to improve on this move. Here, White is showing an advantage. He has this neutralized center, but he's making some challenges. If this c pawn is traded for one of Black's centralized pawns, the center is not necessarily better for Black. I think the main inefficient, or basically the main asymmetry in this position has to do with this center. Otherwise, the rooks are pretty well and somewhat symmetrically placed. The queens are about the same in terms of value. The real difference here is this central structure. Basically, white has two pawns here, and black has these two connected pawns, which I think are strong. So I think the move to revisit here is going to be so I think bishop c6 is fine, relatively average move for black. But I would strongly prefer bishop, or I would I don't think you can tactically play it here. But as a fundamental perspective, this c5 move is going to allow these pawns to exist, relatively unchallenged for the rest of the game. In fact, if you look at it, c5 creates a connected passed pawn for black. Hey, thank you very much, West, for the follow. So here, this structure is good for black, and with the pawn played to c5 and not the tension maintained on c4, this basically pawn structure is this pawn structure is strong, and white is no longer challenging it with his pawns. So I guess I think this is probably the position to revisit for this game. How does white maintain the tension on the center? The answer is not pawn takes d5, because here, this allows this really aggressive threat on g2. So that's very dangerous. So, in an ideal world, you might be able to create symmetry in the center and eliminate black's advantage with trading off the pawn on c4 for the pawn on d5. But that's going to allow this pretty aggressive threat on g2. So it's not tactically playable at the moment. An alternative needs to be found. As a big picture goal, it's a good idea. So the moves that I would look at are I'd probably take a look at queen c3. Engine suggests queen e3. Rook ad1 makes sense. Rook fd. I'm kind of confused by rook ad1. Engine is suggesting rook ad1. That looks like it hangs the a3 pawn, so I don't like that. I'd say rook fd1. But something that doesn't relieve the pressure in the center and allow black this pawn structure. And also basically so leave this pawn structure to be strong for black, and then keep things, basically make sure that black doesn't get the tactical shots in that he needs to really cause problems for white. But c5 is not the move. So that's the first move in this game I think that's worth re-examination. This all looks like it traded off into a relatively equal position. But again, one of black's primary strengths is this connected passed pawn on d5. I don't see any way in which this connected pawn on d5 doesn't cause white problems later in the endgame. Here, it trades off into an interesting rook and pawn endgame. And I think, ultimately, white does a great... I think this is a draw, right? White does a great job tactically to secure the draw. I think that's, that was a really good way to play it. But yeah, otherwise what I see here is a somewhat unorthodox French. Both sides play pretty well. Knight c6 causes black some positional disadvantages relating to the inability to undermine with c5. But really, this is an expert or master level game. I mean, it's a pretty strong game. So the number of really tangible mistakes I think is going to be relatively low. Yes, we do have a Discord server, Topo. I'm working. I've gotten some great support from the Chess Study Group Discord. But I've actually also Richard was willing to was nice enough to create his own Discord. So since you asked, I'll post the link right now. But we do actually have a personal Discord server for this stream, and you know, that's one place among many where you can post games, and I'll add them to the list. So yeah, so let me send the link since you've asked for it. Uh, I'll pull that right now. Um, uh, Here we go. Um, Here you go. That is my personal Discord for this stream. Feel free to post games. It's a little bit quiet at the moment, but we're looking at another route for games to be sent in. But any way you send them in is fine. But that's just the one that we've created to get the Discord. Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Topo. We'll there's there you know we're really in the early stages. But I think this is something that uh you know, basically there's many things to fix. I was thinking 6 Dark Slide. I've been giving him a little bit more time, and I have my cybersecurity class at noon. But it's definitely going to get through the 6 slots that I said, you know, that I confirmed that I would be doing. I think 6 is usually a pretty good number. Um, Anyways, here's the one improvement that I would offer for you to port. I think otherwise the game's master level very strong. Um, I don't have a ton of things to add, but just this from a fundamental perspective. There's an old position in I think it was Common Sense in chess by Lasker. Cool. All right. Thanks, Darkslide. I'll add that. Thank you for sending that game in, Darkslide, and we'll get to that at 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sending it. And anyone else, feel free to send games. I'm just gonna add them to the list as they come in. Um, so yeah, Darkslide added for the 10 a.m. stream tomorrow morning. But yeah, Feudaport's, you know, a mass expert or master level player, very strong. But that's the one. That's the one I was thinking of. This improvement C5 over D5 here, or C5 allowing the D5 to become connected and passed reminds me of an old position in Common Sense in chess by Lasker, where there's a similar position where a connected pass pawn is established. Um, but uh, but yeah, that's I think pretty uh, I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I can offer there. Um, Otherwise, the game app plays really intuitively, strong play. Um, it trades into a rook and endgame where I feel like white overachieves against some pretty solid chances. I mean, you know, if we take this position, I think you know I would certainly take black's side on this. It's up a pawn and dangerous position for white. But white executes excellent ability to draw this game and good endgame, good rook and pawn endgame play. Um, but yeah, it's yeah, solid. Good game. But the one takeaway that I can definitely offer in this analysis is on that C4 move. It's just um you know it's better to leave this you know, pawn structure tense and unresolved in the center than it is to simplify it and leave black with the connected passed pawn. That's my biggest takeaway from this game. Super interesting game. But I think that's one kind of big picture positional thing to consider. Otherwise, super interesting game. Thank you very much, Fudaport, for sending it, and yeah, awesome. Interesting stuff. You're a strong player. I'm adding what I can. That's the only thing that I might have considered differently from a strategic perspective. Um, Black also, by the way, was a national master in this game. Um, Third game. Um, okay. All right, so let's look. This is a game that was sent on Reddit. This was game played. This was basically yeah. So sent on Reddit, and we'll take a look at this. I haven't looked at it, so I have to go through it quick. Um, Interesting, cool. Okay, yes, another strong game. Let's look. So it looks like basically a d4, knight f6, g6, bishop g7. So modern game, um, modern Pyrrhic type position. White as always has this huge spatial advantage in the center, less cramped development, and better places to develop his bishops. Black is hoping for an overextension. E5 is a good challenge, I think, by Black to basically disrupt White's center. This is a pretty stable pawn structure in the center for Black. I think Black's looking fairly solid. Knight f6, knight c5, a5, and overall here, White has fairly, I guess I would just say standard modern type spatial advantage in initiative. Um, White's looking pretty good. Uh, you know, I think this trade is probably not so good. Um, uh, and castles here offers black an opportunity to either. So basically, here, look, right. So white castles, and then black gets to put more pressure on this e4 pawn. White has a big spatial advantage, but he is running a little bit close to that, that breaking point of, has white, over or has white overextended here. It's an interesting question. Basically, when you start having loose pawns like this one on e4, you get much closer to that tipping point. And here with h6, yeah, no, exactly. So with h6, uh, you know, basically black is either forced to trade off his good bishop on g5, a pretty mobile bishop, um, or lose this pawn on e4. So black is putting the overextension type pressure on white, as is his goal in the modern opening. After bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, the eval is showing favorable to black. I mean, the threat on e4 is gone, but this bishop pair is now good for black, and if black can successfully open the position, he'll be able to capitalize on this positional advantage. F4, yeah. So F4 is a position. Is I think an error. I think here there's a few different alternatives. Bishop e4 puts this bishop on a super dangerous diagonal for white. Um, uh, but I don't know, maybe g5. There's a few different ways that black can play it, but these lines are opening up, and black's going to end up with some powerful bishops. The bishop on g7 is already pretty powerful. Uh, so yeah, so this is I would argue like one of the best case scenarios for black. White overextended, and then using this pressure exerted on e4 was able to trade for the bishop pair, and then white overextended again with this f4 move, which compromises his king safety. So yeah, so after bishop e5, yeah, no, I think black is playing well and winning this game. Black has a good position here. The eval favors it. But yeah, just demonstrating sort of the modern, white. Yeah, no. So basically, white has the has overextended and black has capitalized the strategic goal of black in the modern. Um, So I think, yeah, white just doesn't, white doesn't want to simplify, or sorry, white doesn't want to simplify. Black does want to simplify, and black's leading towards a two pawn up rook and pawn endgame, and should be able to convert this. From a strategic perspective, let's think a little bit about where the where the improvements are. Modern is a tough opening to play. I tried it, had difficulty making it work. It gives white a big spatial advantage and a developmental advantage. But this is a well played game where it's where black basically has his strategic goals accomplished. White does overextend. Uh, so bishop g7, f4. Uh, yeah, I mean honestly, in terms of things for black to improve, um, black's in book for a good percentage of this opening. Um, the engine is arguing for queen e8 over knight c5. I think both are probably fine. Queen e8 eliminates this pin and makes the knight a piece that can comfortably attack. Let's just take a look at a queen e8 line. Queen e8, the bishop, since the bishop doesn't actually want to trade for the... Okay, so I guess I would say, a positional improvement to be made here is queen to e8. This bishop doesn't actually want to trade for this knight. That's a bad trade for white. If white is forced to trade, is forced to trade his bishop for that knight, that leaves black with a bishop pair, which is useful for black. This, basically this trade ultimately, which happens in this game, leads to a good position for black and, uh, basically a strong bishop on g7. Um, so the engine's advocating queen e8, and queen e8, makes this bishop pretty useless on this g5 square. I don't know what's going to end up happening. Basically, maybe an attack with knight h5, knight f4 could be possible. Knight d7 followed by f5, and black basically breaks free of his constriction is possible. But that may be the only thing in this game where I would actually suggest. Oh no, sorry, suggest revisiting. Here's one other thing that I think might be valuable to revisit. Here, the all of Black's play here is going to be on the king side. Moves like f5, bishop takes f5, and strengthening the bishops is really where the play is. Black has no need to undermine what is relatively strong white center here. Black's main advantage in this situation, after rook takes f4, is going to come from improving his pieces and removing his constriction. So for that reason, I think like something like queen g5 or bishop to e5 or bishop to d7 with a rook e8 in mind is probably the best strategic method forward. Um, I guess that's what I would say. Black should be improving his pieces here. This pawn structure is relatively stable. There's not really much for black to do in terms of undermining it. His best case scenario on c6 is trading, but then it gets replaced. So c6 is black's largest error of the game, I think. Um, Straightforward moves improving the pieces, I think, are the way to go. I lean towards g5. I think the engine said that bishop d7 with this rook e8 in mind was good. Bishop d7 also makes a lot of sense. I mean, basically controlling this diagonal, it's a good diagonal for black to control. Prevents anything coming from knight b4. But overall, I guess I would say some piece developing move as opposed to c6. Um, Black ends up getting a solid position, and his pieces end up in a pretty good place anyways. Um, it may have been a relatively quick consolidation of it may have been a relatively quick consolidation of the bishops. I don't know if those trades were as necessary, like particularly the one on c3. Not sure this was a good trade. It's probably fine. I guess tactically speaking, it allows for queen takes g4 and then threats on e4. But the only thing I'm gonna say is to revisit on this game is I think uh, improvement of pieces is a more important part of this position. C6 doesn't really effectively undermine the center too well, and then secondarily, I'm not sure that that goal is hugely important at this point in time. So the things that I would look at, you know, this one's pretty minor. Queen e8, making this bishop in an odd position because the bishop doesn't really want to trade for the knight anyways. So that's a small improvement. But the biggest improvement I think is in looking towards pawn play as opposed to piece play here. White has somewhat disorganized pieces, and with good piece placement by black, I think some of that advantages can be established for black. Um, so that's one thing that I would say. Uh, just want to make sure. So Link. Yeah. No, I think it makes sense. I get that reasoning. But more just in a broad, like I would even take another step back from the position, which is just black's piece play has the potential to be very good here. Black has the bishop pair, and that's going to be pretty strong. The best way to get that bishop pair together, is I think White's best plan forward here. F5 is a double-edged move that could potentially be useful there, like F5, pawn takes F5, bishop takes F5. But I would focus on the pieces. Your plan also focuses on the pieces. But so I think that's good. But it's not as immediate as just playing queen g5, bishop e5, or bishop d7 with the idea of improving the rook on e8 and improving the bishop's diagonal. Otherwise, pretty solid game. It was a good win. I liked it, but that's where I would say an opportunity for improvement might be. Um, Overall, just yeah, good game. But that's something to consider. Thank you very much for sending it. Thank you very much for sending it, Jay Brad, and yeah, please keep sending them my way. It's interesting to see the mix of people sending from Reddit and the people sending from not either Discord or on the chat. It's cool. I have a lot of different routes. I'm really trying to just sort of learn the landscape here. Here's your other game, Jay Brad. You sent two. So let's go over the second one. Um, you're playing black in this one too, I think. So we can go over it. Um, so you play the Sicilian this time. Um, and yeah, looks pretty good to me. Um, I just want to make sure I fully understand it. Um, so yeah, here, yeah, no, thank you for sending the games in. Super interesting stuff. Uh, so we're basically in Sicilian opening theory. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's the best route. Is the Discord. Still streamlining things for sure. I've only been doing this a couple weeks, but very interested in getting a good some good methods in, and it's really helpful to have people who are interested in participating and send such good instructional games. It's awesome. Um, so d4 d3 bishop e7. Um, okay. Book move is queen to c7, but bishop e7 is still also in book. I think that this uh, e5 move is pretty aggressive. Black has a relatively constricted opening or situation. It's the closed Sicilian, um, which can lead to some closed situations. But this these queenside pieces for Black have the potential to become a liability. But the eval's not too bad. Queen a5 is this basically wins a piece and is this yeah, so this is pretty good. Followed up by c4, but white gets two pieces back. Um, yeah, yeah. So this is, I mean, this is pretty good for black until the mate and two threat. Uh, so let's just look just quickly. What's the better? Uh, I hope everyone can see the game. Um, uh, I just want to take a look at a chess's question. Um, chess fan. I mean, that's a very early C4. Maroczy bind Sicilians are pretty interesting. Yeah, no. Thank you for asking, chess fan. Maroczy bind Sicilians with very, very early C4s are, I think they're not played at the highest level too frequently. The Maroczy bind is played, but E4 C4 just as a starting out point leaves D4 very vulnerable to the knight. It basically forfeits d4 to black for the rest of the game. So it's interesting. I oh sorry. Okay, let me pull up. Sorry about that. Um, thank you very much for catching that. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, Link. I that was on me. I had the wrong screen in focus. But yeah, here's the game that I was talking about for a minute. This game is a Sicilian game where basically very tactical, and then black basically misses a mate and two. Wall up a lot of material. Yeah, chess fan. It is an English system. That C4 E4 structure, you can also come from the English. Black's primary weakness is on D4, and it's an interesting. I mean, it's an interesting position. But I think that those basically the threats that Black can generate on D4 and control of the D4 square end up providing Black with some pretty serious compensation. Uh, on the other hand, the d5 square is very restricted, and white controls the d5 square. Just a stylistic thing. I would play the Maroczy bind type structures later in the opening. But I'm sure the opening that you posted is also playable. But it's a stylistic thing. It depends on how comfortable you are with black establishing good placement on d4. Anyways, um, this opening is yeah, no. I think that's right. I think that's right, chess fan. It's an interesting line. I'll take a look at the actual specific line. I mostly just saw the early e4 and c4 and think that big picture that's probably better played a few moves later. Anyways, this hangs at least two pawns for white. This ends up resulting in the c2 pawn and the b2 pawn getting lost. Black is capitalizing. This queen a3, looks like it's gonna hang this bishop. If the knight moves, the bishop gets taken, and if the bishop moves, then the knight gets taken. So it leads to a pretty solid material win. Um, Smooth sailing for white. Let's just. I think this game is a very tactical one, Link. So I think we can mostly ascribe this outcome to tactics. But let's just solve what's the best route for black to fix it. And I think here it's knight to d4. I think knight to d4. Pawn takes g7 is probably best for black for white. But knight to d4 is a good posting of the knight, which really effectively neutralizes this bishop b2 bishop facing towards the king side, which has the potential to become so dangerous. Um, so yeah, uh, really the biggest, this is pretty much all tactics. This queen a5 was a good tactic that ended up basically winning the queen side for you, winning all the queen side pawns. It's awesome. Gives black a big lead. And then I just think basically this this is a pretty thin attack. This is just three pieces here. But I think it got a little and we all make this type of error, but I think it got a little bit underestimated by black, and then uh and then led to this surprise mate in two, unfortunately. Um, but all of this basically could have been shut down uh, with knight to d4 on move 18. Still dangerous. Still, queen can threaten mate on g5, although the queen just takes on f6. Black has to be a little bit careful and has to be attentive. But knight d4 on a basically unattackable post is the move. Um, yeah, and that shuts down white. White's most powerful, or relatively most powerful piece. Um, but overall, J Black, I think it's a solid game. I mean, you're up 6 points in the middle game. That's close to a win. Um, just underestimated that threat. Yeah, no, it happens to all of us. It's just every mistake that everyone sends in is a mistake that I've made 100 times, and this is no different. Like, sometimes those attacks really get very dangerous very quick, especially in faster time control games. But here, just one thing to consider is, sometimes dealing with the threat the most directly is not your best tactical opportunity. Sometimes just blocking it will work well. Um, so uh, so yeah, I guess that would be my takeaway. You played a good game. The attack got underestimated, which happens to everyone. And just in the final position, knight d4. You're pretty. Yeah, no, I think it's right. I think it's just it's not dealing with this threat directly, but it ends up leading you towards it ends up shutting down White's most powerful piece. The engine is also suggesting knight d8 as a possibility. This is a little bit, this for in my mind, this feels a lot worse for black than knight d4 does. This defense probably holds at the end of the day, but it looks sort of rickety, and I'd rather just have the knight on d4 and not. Basically, the primary difference between these two defenses is with here the bishop's mobility ends at d4, but with the engine's other suggested move, knight d8, the bishop has full range on this file. So I'd push for knight d4 here is probably the move that I would think of. Um, anyways, the attack got underestimated, very makeable mistake, and with knight d4, it's pretty smooth sailing for black. White doesn't really have enough pieces to start anything too scary. Anyways, super interesting. Thank you very much for sending that in, J Black. Please keep sending them. I'm thinking about how to do uh, the game submission from Reddit. I'm thinking of moving more towards Discord, but I appreciate you sending that game in on Reddit and responding to the Reddit posting there. So yeah, interesting. Thank you for both of those games, and I hope that was at least a little bit helpful. Here, uh, um, basically, this is Sicilian Alapin. Haven't seen this game before. Just gonna go through it. Yeah, no. Thank you for sending it in, Mackie. No, I'm very sure. Very happy that to get it in, and let's. No, of course, no. Thank you, really, thank you guys all. Like, this stream only works if we have enough material, and I'm really happy to see that we're starting to get enough material. And I really appreciate all you guys for participating and making this all work. So, no, thank you. But yeah, so let's take a look at this. Looks like some volatility late in this game. But let's look at all this. So Sicilian Alpine is characterized by c3 and not an immediate d4. D4 played after c3. That's what the Alpine is. Um, D5, E5, and this is sort of interesting. Here we've sort of transposed into that French-like structure that I was talking about. In fact, this really actually looks like a French game. E6 and D5 against D4 and E5, and probably will end up involving some of the principles of a French game. The principle basically white holding D4 and E5 wins, and not holding it leads to equality or black winning. Um, Queen B3, knight E7. Um, this all looks pretty straightforward. Knight D6 is a pretty interesting outpost. How does that? Let's see how that works out. I guess Knight D6 gets undermined by F6. But maybe later. Okay, castles, Queen D8, Bishop G5, H6, Bishop D2. All right. Yeah, no, I think White's basically played a pretty solid game. He's got a favorable French structure. The French structure where he keeps D4 and E5. So the position's going to have some similarities to that D4 E5 French structure. And if White can similarly neutralize the undermining threats from F6, he's going to have a good position. Um, Castles, Queen D8, Bishop G5, and then H6. The computer I think has probably a good tactical bust here. So let's see: Bishop takes, Queen takes, Rook AC1, and yeah, I understand this. This open file provides tremendous value to White. This open file is similar to the open file that Black sometimes gets on the C file in the Sicilian. Very powerful positional concept. Um, so yeah, that's a sideline. The knight d6 gets posted now. We saw the knight d6. I like the knight d6 outpost. I mean, this is very restrictive for black. On the other hand, you don't want to. You want to. The knight d6 outpost is great. I think it's a good concept. The thing that that needs to be considered with it is just making sure that the defense holds. You don't want to end up in a situation where this knight on d6 can't get out of there. Which it is at the it holds for the moment. But if it stopped holding, this knight wouldn't be able to go back to any of these retreating squares. I mean, the only place forward would be b7, and then it would get stuck to those ones. Anyways, knight d6 is a good outpost, very restrictive outpost for black, conditional on the idea that the defense can be maintained. Interesting. On b5, rook c2, and here, yeah, black seems to allow this two rooks for the knight, or two knights for the rook trade, which is good for white. So this is all looking good for white. Um, Rook f c8 is Rook fc8 as opposed to Bishop f6. Um, the computer's posting close to equality. I guess that this assessment is based on so here I basically see white's, I guess technically material is equal, but two pieces tend to play out pretty well against a rook. Um, White's pawn structure is better. So I would say, in general, I would say that many characteristics of this position are better for white. The computer calls it equality, and the reason why it calls it equality is because the computer predicts that black is going to have control of this C file. This game ends up being about the C file. I mean, the C file's material value is probably like half a pawn or maybe a pawn, almost a pawn. So that's where the assessment is. So let's just look here. The computer is assessing this position as equal, and it's to me it's a pretty asymmetrical position, and a complicated one. And you know what are the things that are advantageous to either side? The things that are advantageous to either side, I would say, are whoever wins this C file is has value to them. The computer assesses that as black. I think probably at the end of the day it ends up being black. So let's put the C file, the openness of the C file, as an advantage for black, assuming that black is able to control it, which I think after everything trades off, he will be. Um, Advantages for white. White has a healthier pawn structure. These pawns are way two pawn islands beat three in virtually every situation. Um, so that's an advantage for white, and white has two pieces versus a rook. So that's an advantage for white. Black has more pawns, but this straight up two pawn advantage is not really the correct assessment. Because white's pawn structure is healthier, black's two pawn advantage is actually more probably like a pawn and a quarter or a pawn and a half or something. It sort of draws into the question the whole way of assessing positions using pawn as a unit, because not all pawns are equal, and not all, and basically, not all pawns are equal. So calling a unit something which is inherently unequal in different positions is sort of a weird thing to do. Um, but it's a good rule of thumb. But it's still like, this. How many pawns is black up? Well, he's up two pawns, but he's actually up a pawn and a half or a pawn and a quarter because the position makes his pawns relatively less valuable than white's. Um, Assessment is complicated. But the 2 points, the 2 points basically to think about are, the different advantages and disadvantages of either side. White's pawn structure is better. Black has more pawns. White has two pawns to a piece. And no, we're getting to it. I think I just have to make sure because I think it's under a different screen name, right? But we have two more today, and I think it's one of those two. If not, it's on the 6:05. Whatever. If I said the 10 a.m. stream, it's gonna be part of the stream, and if I said the 6:05 p.m. stream, it's gonna be that part of that one. Um, but we still have time for this session, so it's probably one of those two. Um, Sorry, I gotta I there's a lot of things that from an administrative perspective that I'm working on. Uh, Anyways, this game is interesting. I think White played pretty well, exploited the edges of basically the underdevelopment of Black's queen side here, which can happen in the French or Sicilian. Um, let's go back and just see. No, 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 not at all. No, not problematic at all. No, it's super helpful for you to send games in any case. So it's me who needs the better organizational system. Hopefully I'll be able to get that all together, but I need to like make it organized so that I have the chess.com names coordinated to the Twitch screen names and the Twitch screen names coordinated to the Discord screen names. That makes that question a lot easier to answer. Um, but yeah, no, I like many things to improve here, like a lot. But thank you all for being here, and thank you all for sending the game. No game submission is problematic, chess fan. It's all helpful. Um, but I think there's some so let's see tactically sort of what happened, because from this perspective, I think White's closing in on no, I like it. Uh, I like doing this analysis. This is the high point of my day for sure. Uh, so yeah, here, basically, white is winning by a lot. Um, White is up a full piece, equal pawns, better pawn structure. Uh, Open king side, better king safety. White's played a good game. He deserves, White's closing in on a win here. Close to a win, for sure. Um, and but in a situation like that, you need to be very careful. If you have a win, you need to try your best to make sure that you have the tactical vision to make sure that you don't miss anything. This G5 move was very sneaky for black and dangerous. Um, this Queen B1, you know, is very problematic if white isn't careful with it. It offers back rank mate threats. Um, and then this ultimately happens. Rook trades, and then on knight can't take e6. On knight takes e6. Queen plays to b1. The only moves here for black, or sorry, for white are ones moving the pawns on the king side. So g5 was really a trap move by black. Um, this played out, super dangerous. It's a very makeable mistake. I mean, you've got a big advantage here, um, and just like happens in chess, those one move slips really can lead to dangerous things happening. And then from here, unfortunately, it's all black's advantage. Um, yeah, that's kind of a bummer. The so I guess the best solution that I have on those types of things is just you know first, I guess, double check your moves, and try make sure that what is black threatening is a question, I think that's helpful to keep in your mind. Like, without anything else, why was G5 even played? G5, I guess, was played to give this queen more mobility. But why does the queen need more mobility? It's to generate a tactical complication on the back rank for white, um, which is dangerous. Dangerous thing to happen. Uh, and then yeah, no. So I guess double checking what each move does and what changes in the position from move to move. Um, but that's very hard to do. It's really easy to miss things. The next thing I guess I would say is, you know, this is sort of a broad solution to a narrow problem, but keep in mind that just overall tactical training. Overall tactical training will help with all of your tactics. It I understand this is partially an attention related trap. But the having better overall tactical vision will help you sidestep some of the more dangerous ones of those. Um, that's uh, uh, that's the advice that I can give there. Improving your overall tactical vision will help you avoid those things. Um, you know, and double checking what each move does for your opponent could potentially help there. Um, it's a bummer. I mean, from a positional and strategic perspective, I think white played a pretty good game here. This knight got outposted on d6 in a sound way, which is a big edge for white. White makes the correct tactical decision, trading off the rook for two pieces here. Um, and going into the end game, White secures a 4 point edge. Uh, it was really just a tactical slash attention issue that lost this game, and my ability to help with that is not so great. It's basically just make sure that you're double checking all your moves and improve your tactical vision. But those are both things that need to kind of be done. On the learner's side, I can say it, but I can't really enforce it or do anything that's too helpful. So I can lead you towards good tactical study, but at the end of the day, that one's just that one's just the weightlifting aspect of chess. It's about execution and not strategy. Um, I think your execution and strategy, I think your strategy in this game was great. I think you exploited many of the positional weaknesses that Black had. But at the end of the day, those one move attention problems happen to all of us, and the best you can do is just sort of minimize it. Overall, thank you for the game. I think it's a good game, well played game. No, no, nothing too much to complain about when you're going into the late middle game with a 6 pawn edge. Um, yeah, no, tactics I think is the place to do it. Chess Tempo's free. Chess.com, Puzzle Battle, and Puzzle Rush are what I do. I think they're great. And there's another one called CT-ART, which is a downloadable program. But all of those are the next step forward, I think, for you. From a strategic perspective, I don't have much to add because I think that was pretty much done correctly. Um, that's just putting in the time. But I think you can look forward to having some good improvement once your tactical vision is a little bit more bulked up. Um, okay. On to the next game. Thank you very much for sending that, Mackie. Please keep sending games in the future, and yeah, it's very helpful and instructive. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, and thank you very much for subscribing. I really appreciate it. It's a very nice of you to do, and yeah, hope to see a lot more of you on the channel in the future. Cool. So this is Drayson's game, and this is Caro-Kann. Caro-Kann with a queenside castling. Trades off into. I really do. This just looking at this, I really do think I need to do like a queen or a rook and pawn endgame session. Um, there's some fundamentals there that I think are important. This is an interesting Caro-Kann. So Caro-Kann generally, the most common move here is d4, d5, and then and then knight c3. That's what's the most common here. Not saying the most common is always the best. Sometimes it isn't, but but that's what you see the most frequently. I made everyone do this, or I made everyone go through this very drawn out exercise. But hopefully, if anyone's here from that, this is the mainline Caro-Kann. And you'll know that you've done the mainline Caro-Kann correctly because you take the bishop on d3 with the queen on move 10. Mainline Caro-Kann, this is what it looks like. Very common, about 10,000 games in the database. That's how it goes. E4, E5, E4, C6, D4, D5, knight C3, pawn takes, knight takes, and then advancing that H pawn, and then trading off the bishops on d3 so that the queen takes on d3. That's how you know that you're in the mainline Caro-Kann, or at least how I memorized it. But something to memorize. Anyways, e4, c6, and knight f3 is a sidestep of the main line. Interesting. D5 is the most common move here. Most common response is knight c3, maybe transposing it into the regular Caro-Kann with d4, maybe. But knight f3 is an interesting sideline that I don't know super well. Knight c3, knight f6, d4. And yeah, honestly, I think probably black's pretty close to equalizing. With knight c6, which is the most common move, it's a symmetrical position, sort of drawish. Let's take a look at the analysis, but I don't think white. I think the analysis evaluates this as complete equality, and I think that's probably about right. This opening, this four knights got very simplified. So, yeah, here black play bishop g4 is better than knight c6, but either way, black has managed to transpose himself into an equal game. We might revisit this opening in a minute. Um, Black's playing pretty well, and yeah, and then some tactical volatility. F5 allows queen takes b7, and then knight d8. On knight takes d5, bishop takes a6. And I guess we're about materially equal here with the threat on the knight. Yeah. I live in New York City, or I'm broadcasting from New York City, so plenty of police sirens, plenty of fire engines here. I should probably close the window in the other room and see if that helps. But yep, sirens are a big part of living in this city. Um, anyways, this Black has a pretty good position here, to be honest. After this, White's lucky enough to. Oh, cool, awesome, Mikey. Um, cool. Yeah, I didn't know that. Very cool. Yeah, we should. Yeah, we should figure out a tournament or something at some point. Um, yeah. Yeah, this is interesting. Um, but yeah, so overall, I guess I would say, White, Black's been very tricky about this opening because, what he ends up getting is a very simplified opening with good drawing chances. That's not ideal for White in the Caro-Kann. So on d5, I guess what I would suggest is knight to c3. Um, this leads to a lot of complexity. D4 is kind of interesting. I don't know what White does on d4. Probably knight e2 and then knight g3. Uh, but um, but yeah. On d5, the better transposition and the most common one is knight to c3. Um, it's a weird opening. To be honest, I play the mainline Caro-Kann with d4, d5, knight c3. So I don't know the knight f3 lines as well. But with knight f3 d5, black is basically sort of black is playing for pawn takes d5, securing equality. Um, and as white, I think this one is probably just one you have to memorize. Like, you don't want to give black equality in the opening if you don't have to as white. So here, knight c3 is an improvement on d5, and I don't think there's anything better to do than just memorize and play it. From an eval perspective, it's 0.5 for knight e3, and 0, I think, or close to 0 for pawn takes d5 here. Um, C takes d5, and then all of I guess black's options here. D4 is the primary one, but it's too symmetrical. I think it's all gonna it's gonna lead towards equality. Um, I like knight c3. So anyways, so something to consider. Knight c3 over pawn takes d5. There's no reason you might as well play the developing move that defends your only point of weakness. So knight c3, I would say, is probably the correct idea. Um, anyways, d4, bishop g4, bishop b5, and yeah, pretty close to equality. Um, uh, just looking at different options here. Um, I think it's probably not a good idea to play bishop. The computer's advocating bishop takes c6. That's a pretty interesting approach. I figure giving bishop takes c6, pawn takes c6, rook b8, and then rook has strong attacking on this b2. Um, yeah, that's pretty. That's an idea. Um, it seems to be the idea that the computer is okay with. But the computer doesn't mind kind of open rank attacks on pawns that aren't that important. Um, Tricky. Uh, But okay, so I'll just go with bishop e2. I think bishop e2 is fine. I'm not gonna go through the length of figuring out exactly why the computer thinks bishop takes c6 is okay. I think keeping the bishop pair is probably the best idea. Bishop d6, queen d3. Um, I'd probably castle over d3. I think, yeah, castling is probably a slightly better continuation of development. Either way, though, or maybe queen d2. Uh, queen d3 sort of encourages bishop to g6, and after bishop to g6, like queen d2 or queen d1, and the bishop I think overall has improved slightly. I don't know. It's an interesting position. Uh, Here I guess I would say I think as a big picture strategic thing, castling kingside is probably better than castling queenside. This is a situation in which you know, black is going to get some open lines on the queen side. You know, we've already sidestepped one because we didn't play bishop takes c6. But black is going to attack aggressively on the queen side here, and as a result, I think for a king safety perspective, um, it's better to castle kingside in this situation. So I think castling. I think this is a point to revisit. Uh, so if you castle queenside, the eval is minus 3.8. If you castle kingside, the eval is going to be like probably minus 1.5. So that 2.3 pawn advantage really does, you know, mean that the king safety is going to be a lasting issue. Um, so for in terms of takeaways from this game, you know, they're a little, you know, I guess I would say I have this one opening one, which is try not to provide your opponent too much ability to create symmetry in an opening. Symmetry in an opening generally implies equality. Not, you know, not always, but thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Jen. Just for anyone who's new, Jen is my girlfriend, and Jen is super helpful in organizing some of the, you know, some of the administrative stuff here. It's really helpful because I'm not super good at it. Yeah, no, no. Thank you guys very much for jumping in. Yeah, thank you for being here, Tarash. Um, yeah, so I guess what I would say is, you know, offering, you know, creating unnecessary symmetries for your opponent, as opposed to developing in an asymmetric way, tends to lead towards a more drawish situation. And as white, you're playing for a win. You know, at highest level play, highest level, you know, error free play, which none of us will ever achieve. Or you know, pretty much no one's ever gonna achieve. The correct outcome is white is playing for a win and black is playing for a draw. Uh, Tarash is optimistic about his opportunities to play yeah, to play the highest level chess. I'm happy if chessmate is a fun thing for me to do. But we're all trying to improve, so so let's do the most with what we can. Um, Anyways, what I'm saying is here is too much symmetry creates some problems for white here. I think the better approach is the immediate developing knight c3, and yeah, bishop g4, d4, yeah. Um, so I think knight to c3 over pawn takes d5 is probably the better idea. D4, bishop g4, bishop b5. It's pretty equal, but too much symmetry. And then here's really the okay. So takeaway number one. Don't have to follow this one. It's stylistic, but I think knight c3 leads to better development for white. Pawn takes d5 draws black's c pawn forward. Um, uh, the second thing that I think is a bigger, strategic goal to consider here is even though white has more pawns, the open lines on the queen side here will allow black good piece play. Um, and because of this good piece play, castling queenside offers white some compromised king safety. So here I would say castles. Castles kingside is much safer than castling queenside. And that's basically this. It's called minority attack with 2 pawns against 3. But this opens too many attacking opportunities, I think, for white. Um, I think basically end of day, like this white black was able to open up this lines on this king castled queen side a little bit too quickly. White could have sidestepped this by castling king side. Um, so yeah, I guess I would say the big picture concept is is move when it comes to castling, moving your pieces to the or basically moving your king to the side where the pieces aren't oriented is probably the best choice. Castling kingside I think is the best response. Uh, just in terms of looking at this position, I think it's helpful to evaluate the focus of this rook has a semi-open or open file. This bishop is oriented towards c2. This queen is oriented towards a5 and has the ability to attack. This bishop is oriented towards a3. So black's piece play is actually it's a little bit tricky to see. But black's piece play is actually oriented towards attacking on the queen side here. So that is a big picture concept when you're evaluating king safety after castling. Um, uh, you know, this is the key position. You really have the opportunity to castle to either side here, and develop your rook and connect your rooks. So the question is which one is better? And the answer ends up being castling kingside is better, because these pieces are a little bit of a hard to see way, actually oriented towards attacking on the queen side. So the king side castling is better. Um, so I guess that I would say really think about this position after move 12, because I think having a good conceptual image of why castling kingside is better than castling queenside here is is a helpful positional understanding to acquire. Um, that's what I would say. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from this game, because ultimately the tactics get a little bit out of control and that, but yeah, look at move 12. Think about it for for a few minutes and see why kingside castling is better based on black's piece orientation. Um, Very interesting game. I think this is a super instructive position. And thank you very much, Drayson, for sending it. Really appreciate it, and thank you for participating in the stream. Um, uh, yeah, no, it's interesting. Okay, cool. And then we've got our last one from Spotkins, which means chess fan. Which game was yours? I want to make sure that we got to your game since you brought it up. Um, uh, could you post the link again just so I confirm that it's for tonight? Because I was thinking that it was probably for I can't remember when I said I would review it, but I'm pretty sure I said must have said tonight. Um, but yeah, so let's take a look at this. This is Mikey's game, and let's take a look. Um, this is out of a flank opening. So white gets some space advantage, but black gets an opportunity to undermine it at the ideal point. Um, Queen takes d1, knight e7. And yeah, looks like pretty good for black. Looks like it's sort of equalized, and this all right. But yeah, white got some good tactics in on the king side. Um, okay, interesting. Um, all right. D6 I think is a good move. I think that's a good idea. I think basically the concept of the modern is you basically you basically give white some advantages in space and center control and development, and ultimately break open the game at a at an optimal point. The uh, yeah, so basically at an optimal point. The that's the theory of the modern. The positives for the modern and the positives for the perk in these flank openings is they frequently take white, who might be very booked up in a specific opening, out of their established theory and into something that you're comfortable with, and often doesn't have super well established theory. They're frequently positional tools. Uh, yeah, sure. El Gecko, I think um, let me just pull that up right now. I think it's for tomorrow morning. Tonight or tomorrow morning. Um, 1 second. Um, yeah, Gecko. We're looking at. Sorry, Gecko. We're looking at that game at 6:05 Eastern tonight. It's in the fourth slot for 6:05 Eastern, so probably, somewhere maybe between 6:45 and 7:15, tonight Eastern time. Um, but yeah, thank you very much for sending it over, and we'll get to it tonight, 100%. Um, yeah. So just going back to this game. Um, sorry. Uh, yeah. So D6 I think is a good undermining move. I think when basically the idea of the modern, black gives white some advantages and then breaks the position open at the optimal point in time with pawn break. This is interesting. D6 basically causes this trade on E5 and potentially isolates white's pawn on E5 as well. So this pawn could become a point of attack. If black starts like a quick attack on it or something like you'd have to go a few moves in, but like knight E7, knight D7, and then knight G6. White can't really defend it with the F4 pawn without at least temporarily moving his F3 knight out of the way. Um, so yeah, so I think in terms of creating a freeing positional move, D6 was a good idea because at least now you have the D file open for your queen and you can trade. Um, Bishop takes C3, queen takes D1, and black's basically equal or slightly better. This bishop is stronger than either of white's bishops. G3 can't be played because the F3 knight is undefended, and F5 is looking like a really good outpost to put this knight on E7. Um, D5 is also a usable outpost, but I think maybe F5 is better. Black will get quick development and connect his rooks within 2 moves, and then I think it's pretty smooth sailing. Like any position, there's tactical. I think yeah, knight F5, great posting of the knight on F5. Um, Straightforward development. This is equalish, equalish or slightly better for black. I think it's a good position. Um, Knight e4, awesome. Seizes another outpost for the knight, supported by the bishop b7. Um, Black gets double pawns on the c file, and here I guess I wouldn't play knight takes d4. I think you've really created a good position for yourself. You've secured equality and are making progress turning that equality into an advantage. And here now you've really generated what can be a long-term endgame weakness. These C pawns, this A pawn, and basically White's pawn structure here is fractured. This E5 pawn is also somewhat isolated. Um, I think basically Black's gotten a pretty good position here. So the move, I wouldn't play knight takes d4. Knight takes d4 fixes White's pawn structure. Doubled and isolated pawns are very weak for White. And the need to trade off this knight for that knight. Maybe the knight is better on d4. I don't know. It's a little bit unclear to me, but in terms of it's not worth fixing White's pawn structure over. These pawns will really become a problem for White in a rook and pawn endgame. So I'd leave them. I'd do what you can to leave these pawns fractured as they are. Um, yeah, no, that's true. I think there's definitely some truth to that. And But the move that I think would sort of steers me away from knight takes d4 is the effect that it has on fixing White's pawn structure. These three pawns are going to be exploitable in an endgame, so unless there's a really good sort of identifiable reason, I'd keep them as is. Um, that said, the knight is under attack, so that was I think part of the reason behind knight takes d4 here. Both the knight and the bishop are facing towards this knight. But in this particular case, I think repositioning the knight to like d5, and also by the way, g6 isn't playable because of the pin that the rook is exerting on the g8 king along the g file. Because on g6, knight or bishop takes knight, and then bishop takes, and then the g6 pawn can't retake there. Just so we see it. G6, and then knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes. Um, yeah. So something needs to happen. The knight does need to be moved. But in this particular case, I think it's better to just accept the need for a retreating move, and not undouble White's pawns here. The engine comes up with the sort of engine like h5 challenging the rook on g4. Um, it's a little it's kind of crazy. That's gonna leave to some crazy tactics, some complicated stuff that would take a minute to think through. But from a fundamental perspective, knight e7. I'm thinking knight e7 is probably the safest way. And then just go along a relatively conservative plan where you trade off pieces and ultimately exploit this inferior pawn structure by White in the endgame. That's what I'm thinking is probably the best late middle game plan. But anyways, knight takes d4 is what was played, and Black is still showing a fine position. Um, I think you've got a tactical win here. H5. Let's just play through that. I don't immediately see it, so. Uh, Whoa. Okay. I guess H5 is basically favored as a positional win, or sorry, as a material win based off of trading off this bishop, and then having a rook secure the C file, and then later the second rank. I think that's what they were going for there. G6 definitely. I think is the move. Black's still in good shape here, actually. By the way, according to the eval, G6 is a defensive move needs to be made here. I think I'm guessing this was probably a blitz game, but no, 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 no. It's all good. It's all good, Mikey, for sure. No, not a problem, and nothing to worry about here. But G6, I think, is the move that G6 is an efficient move for shutting down these three pieces at once using your pawn structure. Like, that's good. And yeah, but I think this is just an error. Nothing to worry about. D6, rook takes. Yeah. Um, but even to here, you're in good shape. Um, With G6, you're showing a piece up, and White's not really going to be able to break into the king side super easily. Just an error. Yeah, easy one to fix. This is, I assume, that one's just it was an attention thing. I think it happens to all of us, and G6, and you're in a good place. So nothing to worry about. I think they're good books to read. Like, I think probably like Grandmaster's Mind, or which I haven't read. But I think there are specific books that aim to give you kind of a framework for trying to decrease attention related errors. I've never read one, to be honest. But I know they exist, and I hear from some people that they're pretty good. I think overall tactical vision helps. I think if you have good tactical vision, it draws your eye to like potential things that can go wrong more quickly, and you can be like, oh, well, that's a one move thing, and you miss fewer one move things. So with overall tactics training, but I think in terms of these one like when I look at this, I'm just like, uh, it's just a one move error. These things absolutely happen, and they this in this particular game it determined the outcome. Um, but yeah, the overall tactics training I know will help. But everyone makes attention related errors. I mean, grandmasters miss mate and ones occasionally. It does happen. Um, so yeah. Um, yeah, no, Mikey. I think overall it's a good game. Yeah, no, sure. I mean, go ahead, Tarash. I'm always interested in. I think this is a good game, Mikey. The only move that I think might be worth revisiting is this knight takes d4 move. It's a little better to trade and leave the pawn structure fractured or to not trade and leave the pawn structure fractured than to trade and fix it for him. Like fixing this pawn structure helps white. So I think it might be worth not doing that. Um, uh, and then yeah, just a one move miss. These things happen. They happen to me. That happens. Otherwise, I think Black's played a good game. The one positional takeaway is that undoubling of the isolated doubled pawns, but otherwise pretty solid. And up until the very end, Black was up a piece. So yeah. Thanks very much for everyone for sending the games. Ansh, I guess I would say, it depends on what you're going for. The longer the time control, the higher the quality. The best games for review are probably like Game in 60 plus played over the board. Those are real. At the end of the day, those are the best reviews, or the best games to review because that you're playing pretty close to your optimal decision making. Online, fifth Game in 45 probably does the same thing. Um, the one piece I would advise about getting bored is that over the board makes longer time controls less boring. A game in 45 might be pretty boring to play on the internet, but in person with the actual like pressure of the tournament situation on you, that's when longer time controls become more fun to play. I still find game in 40, 40, 120, game in 60 boring. That is too long even over the board. But the longer the better in terms of analysis at the end of the day. Um, but I think you can come up with some great actionable insights off of reviewing 15-10 games, like you said, Anch. I think it's all. I think that's all a pretty good way to go about it. 15-10 on the internet, yeah, you can definitely use those as good games for review. But every game has instructional points and things to fix and openings to learn. So, um, yeah, whatever's most fun for you at the end of the day, you can come up with actionable insights. Especially if you try to play opening theory, you can come up with actionable insights out of almost anything. My cybersecurity class is about to start. Thank you all very much for being here, and thank you for participating and sending such good games. Next stream is after my class at 6:05 p.m. Eastern. And thank you all very much for participating. It really helped. You know, it's this only works if you guys participate, and I love hearing what you have to say, and the games that you sent in. Super interesting stuff. Really appreciate it. And have a good day. Next stream in about 6 hours. Thanks. Have a good one, guys. Bye.